Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you to the first ever Treehouse Author Talk via Zoom. We usually get to do this in person, and we're so excited that this is even a possibility. We're pleased also that this is a part of the 22nd annual Utah Humanities Book Festival. We have with us Willie Palomo, who is here from Utah Humanities, and Lynn Goodwin, the Executive Director of Treehouse Museum. I'm Wes Whitby. I am the Programs Manager for Treehouse Children's Museum, and I get to act as our moderator for this today. We're here to introduce to you one of my new favorite authors. She's not a new author by any means, but I am new to her work. I've read 3 books so far, and we're very excited. Not only that, for that reason, but because she is local to Utah. She lives here, and we love that about some of the authors and artists that we get to meet. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Shamile Said Mendez. It's so nice to have you with us.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here today, and I'm honored that I'm the first author taking part of this new series. And again, we set this off camera, but I wish we were in person. But at the same time, how awesome that technology allows us to connect even during this difficult time. So I'm very honored to be here today. Thank you.
It allows us to connect, and it allows your cat to connect with us too.
Yes.
That usually doesn't happen.
She's right there.
Several of the folks that I invited to join us today will be excited about that as well.
Exactly, yes. I have my little emotional support companions. So.
Well, we're very excited, and I am especially, having just read your most recent book release, Furia. I was saying before, it was a quick read for me. My wife was asking me what I was up in the middle of the night doing. And it was finishing that book. It was a page turner. I had to get through it. And the thing I find out about your books is that they come from a very personal place. I feel like when I was connecting with Camila, and earlier when I was connecting with Miranda, that in another book, that these were people that you knew intimately. Can you tell us a little bit about you and your career and where you're coming from to start these?
Excellent. Yes. So again, my name is Shamile Sayed Mendez, and I was born and raised in Rosario, Argentina. And I moved to Utah when I was 19 to go to college. And then not very long after that, I met my husband, who's from Puerto Rico. And we moved around a little bit, but because we had family here in Utah, we kept coming back, and this is where our family was formed and where our children have grown. And I just love that we have this common ground, and we've been very happy, and we've loved living here in this beautiful state. I'm not a fan of winter, but I never even liked winter when I was in Argentina, which in my opinion, winter is even worse there, because in Rosario, it's very, very humid. And oh my goodness, there's no way to get away from that cold that seeps into your bones. But other than that, other than the cold, I just love everything about living here, and it's our home. And yes, everything I write, I think it's common for every author to put themselves into their stories. And although nothing that I have written has been autobiographical, there is a lot of me in them. So for example, and I have all my books around me. And although I've been writing for a very, very long time, my first book wasn't published until 2018. And then it's been kind of like an avalanche of one right after the other. So sometimes people ask me, how do you do to write everything so fast? And the answer is that some things have been written for a long time. For example, Furia, which is my latest, was the first one that I started writing in 2006. And it just took a very, very long time. And some books take a very long time to marinate. And in the case of Furia, I keep saying that I needed to grow as a person, to know myself in order to know my characters, and to know really the story that I wanted to tell. So that's why it took such a long time. And also the circumstances. I feel like our society is more open now to read about a girl growing up in a barrio in Argentina, and be open to find commonalities with somebody who has a very different life from our own, perhaps. and life's so different that it seems like it's from another world. But at the end of the day, when you go deep into the themes of the books that I write, they're all pretty much the same. So for example, my picture book, Where Are You From?, that came out in 2018, this one was born of a very personal experience, and which is being asked where I'm from pretty much every day of my life. And I think many people who have an accent like I do, or who look a little different from the majority of people here in Utah or other places where they may be the minority, they're used to being asked this question. And although I've been a US citizen for a long time, I still in my heart am very much an Argentine, and that's what I always say, that I'm from Argentina. In my children's case, their experience was very different because they were all born and raised in Utah, and their father's Puerto Rican. So sometimes when they were asked that question because of their name, or because people would meet me and all of a sudden realize, oh, they look like they're not from here, my children didn't know how to answer that question. So that book was born of a poem that I wrote for them. It was a very particular experience. My son, my oldest, is an avid reader, and we were waiting at a signing line for a super beloved author here in Utah, and we speak Spanish at home, and somebody heard us speaking in the line waiting for our turn, and this person turned around, and people, when they ask this question, they're usually just curious and they want to connect, and they want to find a common ground to start a conversation. So they asked us where we were from, and immediately I said Argentina, but my son, I could see in his little eyes, like this whole crisis that he was going through in the span of 30 seconds, that he didn't know what to say. And I said, you're from the US. And that was a very eye-opening experience to me, to realize how different their reality was from mine. And that's where Are You From came from. And I also, I wrote about a grandfather. My paternal grandfather, was a very important figure in my life. He's the one who named me. He was from Lebanon, and so I wanted to pay homage to the influence that my grandfather had in my life. And then in the same case of my stories that I write for Scholastic, I have Blizzard Besties and Random Acts of Kittens. They're adventure stories about children just growing up. They're both set in Utah, because this is a beautiful place and it's so diverse. And some people who have never been in Utah, they don't realize the diversity in our state, not only in the population, but in the climates and the landscape. And it's a super fun place to write about because there's so many options to explore. So in each of my stories, even if they're for young readers or middle graders, or for example, in the book that you were talking about earlier, Wes, On These Magic Shores, I read about 3 little sisters. On These Magic Shores is a kind of like a Peter Pan retelling. I would say it's a Peter Pan reverse story. Whereas Peter Pan can't wait to grow up, my character Minerva, he doesn't want to grow up, excuse me, my character Minerva can't wait, because she is a child with a lot of responsibilities on her shoulders, and she wants to just be free of them, or at least be able to live her own life. And when her mom goes missing, in those dire circumstances that she has to take care of her 2 little sisters, it's when she discovers the magic of being a child. And in Furia, the one that you were just talking about, Furia just came out on Tuesday, and it had the tremendous honor of being selected as Reese Witherspoon's book club second YA pick, and that has been incredible. I've known for a couple months, and that was one of the hardest secrets to keep, but at the same time, one of the sweetest secrets to keep, because of the anticipation and Furia and that Furia contains the most about my early years, I would say, because it's about a girl growing up in Rosario, Argentina, the same as me, living in pretty much my neighborhood and loving soccer, just like I did. And like Camila, when I was growing up, I didn't have the opportunity to pursue that path of becoming a soccer player, just because in Argentina, during my childhood, women were just not allowed. There were no girls' teams. And but this is what my character wants to do. And being the story being set in this contemporary years, which is so exciting that women can finally participate of the beautiful game. It was a fantastic opportunity to kind of create my alternate reality of what I would have loved to do if I had been given the chance. And in my story, Camila is not given a lot of chances, but she makes her own chances many times. And it's just it's a traditional coming of age story, of a girl fighting against obstacles, even if those obstacles sometimes can be the love of her life. And there is a very strong romance aspect, which doesn't overshadow the main plot, but yes, that love story is perhaps Camila's greatest obstacle, because she has to choose between two things that she's been wanting her whole life. So in a lot of these stories, even though the characters are so different from me, and their situations, like in my scholastic books, I did not grow up in Utah, but they do contain a lot of my heart. And I feel like in different aspects, I keep exploring the same themes of family and friendship and empowerment for children, especially girls, who sometimes are told that they can do everything, but in reality, that is not the case sometimes. And so, yes, that was a very long answer to your question.
And it has made me want to ask so many more questions. Let me stop for a second here and just point out to everybody, part of the benefit of doing this wonderful conversation with Shamile is that we wanted your questions as well. So as we continue, please send in the chat box questions to me, and I'll make sure that since we can't hear you, we hear your voice. And we'll ask her those questions too here in just a little bit. I think it's a mark of a good writer, and not necessarily a mark of every writer, if you can write what you know in such a way that people want to know more about it. And I found, reading Furia especially, that I wanted to know a lot more about Rosario. In fact, I was reading on an electric device, and so I just stopped and went to look up your hometown.
I love it so much.
I feel like you were writing, I could, just reading it, I was finding my way through the streets, and I want to go and visit that river. I think that's a great thing. Now that you live in a completely different place, I want to say you live close to my hometown, where I grew up, which I love that one of my favorite authors knows where I lived and has a connection to that place. As you're writing more about those kinds of experiences that you had, do you find that the place where you were raising your children, as opposed to the place where you grew up, affects the way that you're writing? Let me change the question just a tiny bit. As I read the 3 books of yours that I've read so far, I found myself asking myself, would I read this differently as a child than I am as a parent? I was absolutely terrified on these Magic Shores when Mom goes missing. By the way, that's on the book jacket. I'm not giving anything away.
Exactly. Happens in the first chapter, so.
but as a parent, that's a terrifying thing. Yes. And I think for the you did a great job talking about it from the children's perspective too. Do you find that as a parent, it helps you to write these strong mothers that you've got in these books?
Yes, because I had a very strong mother myself. And so I was fortunate enough that I grew up with my mom, and I lost her right before I started on this Magic Shores. So my mom passed away very, very suddenly 7 years ago. And that's when the story spark for Magic Shores was born. In fact, I hadn't been able to write or read at all when this happened. And it was just, I guess, the shock, and reading and writing a story had always been my safe place. And having lost the anchor in my life was very traumatic. And I kept thinking, how fortunate I was to grow up with this strong presence in my life, and that I missed her, but I knew that I would be okay because she had taught me well. And that's how I started thinking about the children who don't have a mom in their lives. And like in writing Furia, when I started writing it a long, long time ago, I thought that Furia was a lot more about Camila's relationship with her father, he's the villain of the story because he's the personification of what's happening in her society with violence against women and misogynism and um, and her not being able to play the sport that she likes. But as I kept revising, I realized that it was more her story. Her story had to do more with her relationship with her mother. Because throughout the course of the story, and this is not a spoiler, but Camila realizes that she and her mom have a lot more in common than she thinks on the very first chapter. And today I had thought that I would read from one of my scholastic books, but I think I'll just go ahead and read from that Furia first chapter, and you'll see her relationship with her mom, how distant it is, and how Camila thinks she will never make the same mistakes her mom did. But as I grew as a person and as a mother as well, I was already a mom when I was working on Furia at the very beginning. I realized that Camila's journey also entails her realizing that her mother did the best she could with the options that she was given in life. And that perhaps if she had had other opportunities, their lives would have been very different. So yes, it is very tricky at the same time because I'm writing from, in the case of Furia, I'm writing from the perspective of a 17-year-old. And I never want to be prescriptive. I never want to sound like I'm preaching a story, or it's not also my place as an author to educate young readers, but I did feel a responsibility for what I'm putting out there in the world. So I was very careful. I'm very mindful of how every character was crafted and the ultimate message of the story.
There's one of the great things about the book, and I like this, wherever I get my literature from, I like it if the people who are writing to you don't talk down to you.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel talked down to, even though I'm not a Spanish speaker. My second language is Russian. Absolutely useless when reading Furia.
But she does have a great grandmother who was Russian.
She does, but as I was reading that, you left so much Spanish in without then turning your head to me and saying, by the way, this means this. And I appreciate that in reading any kind of literature when that happens. So tell me, and then we've got a question about that too. Tell me, as you chose to write this book, what was the defining factor in how much Spanish you left in?
Well, that was Furia was a very hard book to write in terms of craft, because unlike my other books that are set in the US, Furia is set in Argentina. And also the way that people from Argentina speak is very distinctive from every other place in Latin America, just the same way that Puerto Ricans speak their own ways and Mexican people speak their own way. So I had to write a story in English, but give people the illusion that every conversation that is happening is in Spanish. So the words that were left in Spanish are the ones that have no translation and that have no way of being said in English. So the way that I tried to convey the illusion that they were speaking Spanish the whole time is perhaps in the cadence of the words, in the sentence structure, in the sayings, and using other markers of name brands that are unfamiliar here in the US, just to give you, again, that illusion. Because as a reader, and I've always been, most of anything, a reader first, what I like to do is just fall into that dream and not wait and not be reminded that I'm just reading a story. I want to be fully immersed. So a lot of my work through the revision process was to make sure that the reader always felt that they had fallen into this alternate reality or a virtual reality. And Lisa Cron, in her book for writers, The Power of Story, or Story Genius as well, she says that that's the one trick that authors have to use. And it seems so simple, but at the same time, it's so hard because you have to create this illusion. And when people start seeing the tricks of the trade, they are pulled away from the story. So what I wanted to do at all times was for the reader not to be pulled away. And I'm delighted that you stayed up reading, Wes, because that was my main goal. I mean, this book took me 14 years to write, and you read it in
I'm
a
so
few
sorry.
sittings. But that is,
if I read it that
what I
fast,
wanted.
I will read it again. I will read it again.
That's what I wanted, because it means to me as an author, when somebody cannot put the book down, that I did what I set out to do, is that create this reality that the reader doesn't want to leave. So language was a big part of this process.
So can we piggyback on that? Another question
Yes.
about language then. So English isn't your first language,
No.
am I correct?
Yes.
And yet you have no trouble writing in it, obviously. So
No.
do you plan on writing any and publishing in Spanish? It's a question that we've got.
I would love to. I want to write for the rest of my life, and I have so many story ideas. The reason I started writing in English was because I had no support group in Spanish, but writing in English, I had a writers group that helped me go through learn, and then I could go ahead and get my master's degree in writing for children and young adults. But then I was fortunate enough that I was able to do the translation of Where Are You From? And I also was able to do the translation of my next picture book that's called What Will You Be? And in Spanish it's called ¿Qué serás? And that's a very strange opportunity that I had, because usually your work as an author, you have very little control of what happens to it after it's gone to your publisher. So I was given this opportunity, which has been wonderful. And I am hopeful that in the future, I will be able to explore more and write stories in Spanish, because there's certainly a need for that as well. And so, yes, the possibility is always open, and I would love to.
I find that my friends that are from elsewhere in the world have one leg up on me as writers, and that is that they're looking at the language with a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I find that some of my friends who speak English as a second language understand the construction of the language better than I do, and my master's is in English. Because of having to look at it from that perspective.
Yes.
So as you I noticed in this book too, you were translating idiom and sayings. Your whole book starts with it.
Yes.
With a line, by the way, that I think should someday become as famous as the opening to Brothers Karamazov. Or
thank you.
I mean, it's a great opening. As you work through this kind of thing, and as you work through your process, we've got several questions about what your work schedule is like when you're writing this book and your process. Do you want to give away any of those tricks? We all want to be authors with you.
No, but I every time my favorite authors have a conversation like this, I love to hear what they say. There's always something that helps me, so I'm just delighted to help anybody that might be benefited from knowing what my process is like. I am a very disciplined person, and very much like Camila, I taught myself English with a English-Spanish dictionary because I was just obsessed with the English language, and I didn't have access to English language lessons. So ever since I love school, I love learning, and I love books. I'm obsessed with books. And so I love working on them. And now that my children are a little older and they all go to school full time, I start writing as soon as they're gone from the house. And the morning is my time for creative writing. And I'm always working on several things at the same time. I've been very fortunate to work with different publishers. So I have work contracted for a while now, and I have things in different stages of the process. For some things, I just turn in a first draft of a story that I cannot talk about yet, but I'm very, very happy about. I turned it in Friday because I thought, oh my gosh, Foodie is coming out on Tuesday, and my mind will just not be able to write a first draft. I used to love first drafting and create something out of nothing. But I guess my favorite part of the process right now is revising. When you already have all the word salad, like I call it, and you're able to cut and paste and expand or collapse the scenes that aren't working. I just love being the architect of the story in that way, revising. So I find that I can revise better after lunch. So I do all my creative writing in the morning, and then I do revisions later on during the day. And I love to read, so I love to consume stories in any medium. So, but I don't have a lot of time to watch TV, because if I'm reading, I'm not watching TV. So lately, I've just been reading a lot, because there have been so many amazing books that came out in the last couple of weeks. But I do treat reading as part of my job, because I need to know what's happening out there, what's been published, especially in picture books. The picture book arena has changed dramatically in the 10 years, the way the stories are told, the kind of stories that are being told. And as an author of picture books, I need to also keep abreast of what's going on. And also, it's a total indulgence, because I enjoy every little second that I'm reading. And so that's how my day goes. And I have 5 children, like I've said. So many times I'm in the middle of writing, I'm fully immersed in the writer dream of creating a scene, and I get a call from school, and then I have to go and pick somebody up because they got sick or whatever happened, or they forgot their lunch. And I do a lot of reading in audio when I'm driving kids around. My kids are very involved in sports, and so there's a lot of driving all over the States. And I do a lot of audiobook reading and daydreaming in the car. Sometimes that's when my best ideas happen, when I'm just driving around with no music on or no books on, and I just let my mind go away, and I will see an image of something, and this idea will spark. And many times I don't have time to dive fully into that new idea, so I have a recipe box on my desk, and I will write that little spark of the idea in a recipe card and put it away in my box. Sometimes a short story will be able to be born out of that. Sometimes it's just a scene, or sometimes it's just a feeling that I want to imbue in a story. So I'm always working, and I guess that's kind of like the curse of the writer. Everything moves around story, and there's not a moment in the day that I'm not thinking. In fact, my husband and I have been watching the new show Cobra Kai on Netflix, and we've been like obsessed with it. It's been so much fun, this 80s throwback, our favorite movie growing up. And it's been fun that we've been able to talk about craft, because he asked me the other day, how did they do it so addictive that you have to watch the whole thing in one sitting? And how did they do this? And so that's another way of just consuming stories. And I just love to dissect stories, even if I'm supposed to be having fun.
It's very interesting. And I plan to get myself a little file card. Is there a digital version of that? I've moved all digital.
Notes on your phone, Evernote.
That's got to be while you drive, right?
Yes. Yes.
So we have a few more questions. In Furia, your character earns a nickname.
Yes.
Playing sports, and in On These Magic Shores, Miranda doesn't like her name. And the question that follows from that is, how do you choose the names for your characters? And how did you pick those and those scenarios?
Sometimes they come with their own names. So Camila has always been Camila Hassan. And other times I have something very interesting happen to me. Because, for example, on these Magic Shores, Miranda is it's the sister's last name. And she's Mimi Miranda. And their original last name, the sister's last name, used to be Madrid. And then I read a story by Erin Kelly Entrada, and she won the Newbery Medal last year for Hello Universe. And she has a book that's called The Lost Girls, or something like that, The Lost Sisters. And her little sister, the trio of sisters, their last name is Madrid. So the stories were already so similar, and they had the same last name, that I went ahead and changed that from Madrid to Miranda. So sometimes if my character comes with her name, but there's too many popular characters in media with that name, I will try to find something that matches. But usually I cannot dive fully into the story until they're not named. So a lot of the names that I choose for them are names that I couldn't use for my kids. So I have a list.
You didn't have Minerva picked out for one of yours?
No, I did not have Minerva picked up for one of mine.
The one who asked about names is someone named Lucy, and her last name is my own. So that's the name I happen to love.
Yes.
And Lynn, you had a question. She says, I love the poetic descriptions and the rich evocative words in Where Are You From? Any advice for parents and teachers on encouraging that word poetry?
I feel just talking, it starts when kids are babies, and have them fall in love with language, talking to them all the time, describing things to them when you go on a walk, encouraging them to explore language. My children are bilingual, and it's been so fascinating to see how when they're learning two languages at the same time, and also one of their languages, Spanish, they're learning two different dialects of it simultaneously, because like I said before, my husband's Puerto Rican and I'm from Argentina. We use different pronouns and different pronunciations and different intonations for the same words. So it's been so fascinating to see how they are able to absorb all of that. And children do not get confused by many languages. It's just a gift that you can give them. The more words, the better. And so sometimes I love when they speak Spanglish and they create their own language and they conjugate English verbs with Spanish conjugations. That's been hilarious to hear. So just encourage the use of words and reading to them. Reading aloud is a gift that we can give our children, the children in our life. So even my teenagers will join in for bedtime stories if they come in to say a quick good night because they have to go back to homework or their friends or whatever. More often than not, they will pulled in by that siren voice or being read to, and I love it myself. I guess that's why I love audiobooks, so that I can be read to. And there's a different process that happens in your mind when you hear the words versus when you see them, I feel like, because you're also getting their interpretation of the reader of the story. So just read to them as much as you can.
Well, we know you love words, and we know that you love books.
Yes.
I also know, because I've read by Red Furia, that you love soccer.
Yes.
You love football. So when did you decide that being an author was the thing that you loved, that you wanted to make your job? The question we got here is, when did you realize you wanted to be an author?
I wrote my very first story when I was 7 years old. And it was a very sad story because I had lost my grandfather, and I told you that on these Magic Shores happened after I had lost my mom. So I feel like when I write, I can process the things that happened to me in my life, not only the painful and the sorrowful or traumatic, but also the joyful. And so when you get to write things, you get to live many lives. And I know there's a famous author who said that reading is being able to live many lives. And I feel like as an author, you get to to read about many things, like even the simplest stories. When I was writing about kittens, I mean, I've had kittens all my life, but I had to do a lot of research to get it right. And I'm happy that I did, because your readers will catch you if you don't do your homework. And so one of the kittens is in my book is a female, but she's orange. And I learned when I was doing research that a female orange kitten is very unusual because of DNA sequencing. And so just the way that calico cats are usually female. And so I did make sure that I put that in the story. And I had a reader said that she was so happy that I got it right, because she had an orange female kitten and she had never met another one in her life before. So that was a big, and so again, I get to learn about many things, and I get to experience life through many points of views. So I do feel like I have the best job in the world.
So I have a question about the fact that you get to write so many different ages.
Mm-hmm.
Let me say right now that as an adult, even when I was a little younger, I didn't feel like children's books were really for children
Mm-hmm.
only. I feel like they're meant to be for more folks than that. And I think the same thing goes with other kinds of literature. Although I think this young adult book that you've written is for young adults.
Yeah.
Now that I've said that, but was there a point where you said, okay, I'm going to write for this audience versus this audience, or are you throwing it all out there and going, let me write for all of these audiences as long as I can?
The thing is, sometimes I just get the seed of a story, and I get the entryway from a certain point of view. Like on these Magic Shores, it would have been very different if Minerva had been a driver, if she could get a job. It would have been scary for the mom not to come back home, but she would have had more resources than she had as an 11-year-old going through this situation. So choosing a specific age is crucial in the way that you approach the story. But it's not like sometimes I say, oh, I'm going to write for this specific group. Maybe because when I was young, I just read voraciously everything that I could get my hands on. And I never, and my mom was wonderful in the sense that she never censored me. And she knew that sometimes I would, but she trusted me. So sometimes I would get a book, and I would know in my heart that I wasn't the target audience, or that it wasn't appropriate for me to read yet, and I would put it away, or I would just not be interested, or things would go over my head. But I just read everything. And so in my mind, there wasn't a difference that some certain books were targeted to children or others to adults. And so I just, but when I'm writing, I feel like I got stuck I'm drawn to write about children who are in between places. For example, with the picture books, when they're right on the verge of starting school, they're getting ready to know the world and leaving the home in a way. And then middle graders are going through puberty, which we all go through, and sometimes people want to forget about that, but they're in the chrysalis, about to come out of this of the chrysalis to become their own people. And then young adults, again, they're ready to leave and shed the persona of being children and become adults in this world, which can be so scary and daunting, but at the same time, it's such an exciting time in your life when you can just become whatever you want. So I find that these three ages are so fascinating, and that it gives me the freedom and the opportunity to explore life through these three different points of views.
So remind us again when your next book is coming out, the one that you got in the can.
Okay, so I have remember Furia just came out. I have a book coming out with HarperCollins on January 5th, and it's called Shaking Up the House. And it's about the daughters of the outgoing president of the US pranking the daughters of the incoming president. So it's a super fun story, no politics, just kids having fun in the White House. And then I have a picture book coming out with HarperCollins in the spring, and I can share that cover yet. It hasn't even been revealed, but I've seen it around social media a couple of times. So I'll do a proper reveal in a couple of weeks once Furia news are not so intense, but I'd love to share it with you. So if I can share my screen. So my next picture book is called What Will You Be? And is illustrated by Iranian-British artist Kate Alizadeh, which has been wonderful to work with somebody who has kind of my same background. My grandfather was from Lebanon, and we have this Middle Eastern connection, but we grew up in such different places. So it was amazing, again, like exactly in the way that it happened with Where Are You From, how I told the story in words and she told it in pictures, and the two complemented each other so well. And What Will You Be is a companion to Where Are You From? And it's a little girl who is constantly asked, what will she be when she grows up? Until she doesn't know how to answer anymore, because every little answer she gives, people dismiss it. So she asks the grandma, and the grandma tells her to look inside her heart. So they go on a journey together, exploring the things that she can be. And it's just my message for children, that they can really be whatever they want to be. And it's also my message for the adults in these children's life, that they won't know what they can become if they don't see it in their lives. So I'm hoping that grown-ups and children alike will be inspired by it. So
this has been a treat. Before we say goodbye to you,
yes.
we want to make sure we've had questions throughout, and thank you for all of you who have been asking these questions. If there are any other questions, now is the time to type them in, because we want to make sure that you're heard as a part of this. That's what makes this chat so much fun, is not only do we get to hear from our author, but we get to hear what you know. There was one question about whether your cat inspired you to write your stories.
I believe she's my supervisor. She's everybody's boss. So I think she just sits there in that chair to make sure that I do my work and I don't log into social media when I'm supposed to be working. But she's my emotional support animal. And I love writing about the friendships between children and animals. So my cat and my two dogs certainly inspire my stories.
Well, thank you so much. I do want to say that this event is a part of the 22nd Annual Utah Humanities Book Festival. This annual free festival is the Utah Humanities gift to the community, allowing us to explore all sorts of ideas by interacting with great writers. The complete program is available at www.utahhumanities.org. Our thanks to the Books Festival's major sponsors, the George S. and Dolores Story Eccles Foundation, Salt Lake City Arts Council, the Salt Lake County Zoo Arts and Parks Funds, Summit County RAP, Weber County RAMP, we know RAMP, the Charles Redd Center for Western Studies, the King's English Bookshop, Weller Bookworks, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the National Endowment for the Arts, and Catalyst. Thanks to Treehouse Museum for being the host, and Weber Book Links for helping to support this as well. And ladies and gentlemen, a great big thanks. Without the applause that we know you're doing, please, a big round of applause and a big thanks to Shamile Sayed Mendez.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you hosting this event, and I think I was able to share my screen.
There it is, the treat at the very end.
At the very end. I love it. So that's What Will You Be? And I just love the grandmother and the little girl so much. And it's having a book out in the world is almost like your child being born. And you never think that, sometimes you're scared, I'm not gonna love them as much as I love my first one. But then you see them and you do love them, and your heart grows and you love them both the same. So I'm just in love with this cover, and I'm very excited for it to be out soon.
Thank you so much, Shamile.
You're welcome.
All for attending.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor.